The flickering streetlights cast long, dancing shadows across the rain-slicked pavement. A lone figure, bundled against the biting chill, hurried down a deserted alleyway, the sound of his footsteps echoing ominously. He clutched a worn leather journal to his chest, its pages filled with a secret so profound, so utterly unbelievable, that it had consumed his very existence. This is not just a story. It is an unraveling, a descent into a reality fractured, a mind tested beyond its limits. We delve into the extraordinary case of Arthur Finch, a man who swore he lived not one but two lives, intertwined yet agonizingly separate. What if the world you knew, the memories you held dear, were merely echoes of another, entirely different existence? What if every choice you made, every path you took was simultaneously played out on a parallel stage? This is the mystery we seek to solve. Before we plunge deeper into Arthur's bewildering narrative, if you're captivated by stories that challenge the boundaries of reality and leave you questioning everything you thought you knew, consider subscribing to our channel and hitting that notification bell. We unveil mysteries every week that will send shivers down your spine. Our journey begins, as many do, with an ordinary man leading an ordinary life. Arthur Finch, a quiet librarian in his late 40s, resided in a quaint, unassuming town nestled in the heart of New England. His days were a predictable rhythm of cataloging ancient tomes, assisting eager readers, and enjoying solitary evenings with a well-worn classic. He was a creature of habit, his world meticulously ordered, his routine a comforting blanket against the unpredictable. Or so it seemed. The first crack in his carefully constructed reality appeared subtly, a whisper at the edge of his perception, easily dismissed as a trick of the light or a momentary lapse in memory. It began with small discrepancies. A book he distinctly remembered shelving in the history section would inexplicably appear in fiction. A patron he had spoken to just moments before would greet him as if they had never met. These instances were fleeting, ignorable, like static on a distant radio, but they accumulated, gathering weight, until they became too numerous, too insistent, to simply brush aside. Arthur, a man of logic and order, found himself grappling with a growing sense of unease. He started keeping notes, meticulously detailing every anomaly, every shift in his perceived reality. His journal, the very one he clutched in the alley, became his confidant, his anchor in a world that felt increasingly fluid. One Tuesday morning, Arthur woke with a jolt, a vivid dream lingering at the edges of his consciousness. In the dream, he had been a renowned architect, designing breathtaking skyscrapers that pierced the clouds. He had a wife, Sarah, with flowing auburn hair and a laugh that could chase away any shadow. They lived in a modern, minimalist apartment overlooking a bustling metropolis. He remembered the scent of her perfume, the warmth of her hand in his, the intricate details of a life he had never lived. He dismissed it as a particularly potent dream, a product of an overactive imagination fueled by late-night coffee. But the dream recurred, night after night, each time more detailed, more real, until the lines between waking and dreaming began to blur. Then came the tangible evidence, the undeniable proof that his mind was not simply playing tricks. Arthur was a meticulous planner, always leaving his keys on a small antique dish by the front door. One morning they were not there. He searched frantically, retracing his steps, growing increasingly agitated. He was certain he had placed them there. He always placed them there. Frustrated, he grabbed his spare set tucked away in a drawer. Later that day, returning home, he found his original keys, not on the dish, but hanging on a hook by the back door, a hook he rarely used. A small detail, perhaps, but it was a detail that shattered his sense of certainty. He began to question everything. His colleagues at the library noticed a subtle shift in his demeanor. He became more withdrawn, his eyes often distant, lost in thought. He would occasionally pause mid-sentence, a flicker of confusion crossing his face as if searching for the right word or perhaps the right reality. Senior Gable, A kind, elderly woman who frequented the library once asked him if he was feeling all right. "You seem a little elsewhere, Arthur," she observed, her voice laced with gentle concern. Arthur merely offered a strained smile and mumbled something about being tired. How could he explain to her that he was indeed elsewhere, in a life that felt as real, if not more so, than the one he was currently inhabiting? The architect dream intensified. He found himself recalling specific conversations with Sarah, the intricate details of architectural blueprints, the names of clients he had never met in his librarian life. He remembered the feeling of accomplishment, the thrill of seeing his designs rise from the earth. These weren't fleeting images. They were full-blown memories, rich with emotion and sensory detail. He started referring to his librarian life as Realidad A and his architect life as Realidad B. He needed a framework, a way to categorize the chaos that was consuming him. The first major crossover, the undeniable collision of his two timelines, occurred during his lunch break. Arthur was sitting in the quiet park across from the library, eating a tuna sandwich when a woman passed by, pushing a stroller. Her hair was a vibrant auburn, and as she laughed at something her child said, Arthur felt a jolt, a visceral recognition that sent a shiver down his spine. It was Sarah. But she didn't see him. She walked past, a fleeting vision from another life, leaving Arthur breathless, his sandwich forgotten. He knew her. He knew her laugh, the way her hair caught the sunlight. But in this reality, she was a stranger. This encounter propelled him into a frantic search. He spent hours online, delving into theories of parallel universes, quantum entanglement, and multiversal existence. He devoured scientific papers, philosophical treatises, and even fringe theories, desperate for an explanation. He felt a desperate need to understand, to rationalize the impossible. Was he experiencing some form of elaborate delusion, or was he truly straddling two distinct realities? The internet offered no definitive answers, only more questions, more possibilities, each more mind-bending than the last. He found solace, or perhaps further torment, in the accounts of others who claimed similar experiences, though none as detailed or as consistent as his own. The journal became his sanctuary, a place where he could record the increasingly bizarre occurrences without fear of judgment. He documented the subtle shifts, a new coffee shop appearing on his usual route, a familiar landmark subtly altered, a news headline that seemed to contradict his memory of an event. He noted the emotional toll these shifts took, the constant anxiety, the pervasive sense of disorientation, the fear that he was losing his grip on sanity. He felt like a detective in his own life, piecing together fragments of a shattered mirror, hoping to reveal a coherent image. One evening, while in Realidad A, Arthur was watching a documentary about historical landmarks. The narrator spoke of the old Carnegie Library, a grand Gothic structure that had been demolished decades ago to make way for a modern office complex. Arthur felt a wave of confusion. He distinctly remembered the Carnegie Library. He had worked there for years before transferring to his current branch. He remembered its creaking wooden floors, the scent of aged paper, the intricate stained glass windows. He remembered the day it closed, the emotional farewells. But the documentary stated it had been gone for 50 years. He checked local historical archives, finding photographic evidence matching the documentary's claims. Yet, his memories of working there, of walking through its hallowed halls, were undeniably real. The crossovers became more frequent, more intense. He would wake up in his librarian apartment only to find a half-finished architectural drawing on his desk, or a blueprint for a building he had designed in Realidad B. He would find notes in his own handwriting, detailing client, meetings, and construction schedules, notes that had no place in his librarian life. He started leaving deliberate anchors in each reality, a specific book placed in an unusual spot, a unique object left on his nightstand, hoping to track the transitions. But the anchors themselves would sometimes shift or disappear, or appear in the wrong reality, further blurring the lines. The emotional toll was immense. He began to feel a profound sense of isolation. How could he explain this to anyone? Who would believe him? He feared being labeled delusional, or worse, insane. He started avoiding social interactions, his once comforting routines becoming sources of anxiety. Every conversation felt like a tightrope walk, every interaction a potential minefield. He was constantly on guard, scrutinizing every detail, every word, for inconsistencies. He found himself questioning his own identity, wondering which Arthur was the real Arthur. Was he the quiet librarian, or the ambitious architect, or was he both simultaneously existing in a state of perpetual, agonizing duality? One afternoon, in Realidade B, the architect Arthur was in a bustling cafe, meeting a client. He was discussing a new project, a sleek, modern art gallery. Suddenly, a familiar melody drifted from the cafe's speakers. It was a classical piece, one he often listened to while working at the library in Realidade A. A wave of intense nostalgia, almost a grief, washed over him. He saw himself, hunched over, a desk, surrounded by books, a cup of lukewarm tea beside him. The memory was so vivid, so potent that he momentarily forgot his client, his surroundings. The client, a stern-faced businesswoman, raised an eyebrow, pulling him back to the present. He stammered an apology, attributing his distraction to a late night. But the experience left him shaken. The two realities were not just coexisting, they were bleeding into each other, their boundaries eroding. He began to notice subtle differences in his physical appearance. In Realidade A, he was slightly heavier, his hair a little grayer, his posture a bit more stooped from years of poring over books. In Realidade B, he was leaner, more confident, with a youthful vigor that came from a demanding, creative profession. He would sometimes catch a glimpse of himself in a mirror and see a reflection that seemed subtly wrong, a face that was both familiar and alien. It was as if his body itself was struggling to reconcile the two distinct existences. The most terrifying aspect of his condition was the fear of losing himself entirely. He worried that one reality would eventually consume the other, or that his mind would simply fracture under the immense pressure. He started experiencing moments of intense dissociation, where he would feel detached from his own body, observing his actions as if from a distance. He would sometimes forget what he was doing, or where he was going, for a brief, terrifying moment. These episodes became more frequent, more prolonged, leaving him gasping for breath, his heart pounding in his chest. He decided that he needed to find a way to bridge the gap, to understand the mechanism behind his dual existence. He started looking for patterns, for triggers. Did the transitions occur at specific times of day, under certain emotional states? He meticulously documented everything, hoping to uncover a hidden logic within the chaos. He noted that the transitions often seemed to be triggered by strong emotions, stress, joy, fear, or profound moments of introspection. It was as if his emotional state was a key, unlocking the door to the other reality. One particularly harrowing night in Realidade A, Arthur was awaking from a nightmare. He had dreamt of a terrible accident, a collapsing building, and the screams of people trapped inside. He was drenched in sweat, his heart hammering against his ribs. He got out of bed, needing a glass of water, when he noticed something on his bedside table. It was a small silver locket, one he had never seen before. He opened it. Inside were two tiny photographs, one of Sarah, smiling brightly, and the other of a child, a little girl with bright, curious eyes. A name was engraved on the back. Lily. He felt a profound, aching sadness, a sense of loss for a family he only knew in fragments. He recognized the locket. It was a gift he had given Sarah in Realidad B, a gift for their daughter. The locket was physical proof, a tangible link between his two lives, a bridge built of metal and memory. This discovery pushed him to a new level of desperation. He had to find Sarah, to find Lily. He had to understand. He started searching for them in realidad, combing through public records, social media, anything that might lead him to them. He knew it was a long shot, a needle in a cosmic haystack, but the locket, the raw emotion it evoked, fueled his resolve. He felt a desperate need to reconcile these two halves of his existence, to understand the purpose, if any, behind his fractured life. His search for Sarah and Lily in realidad proved fruitless. It was as if they simply didn't exist in this timeline, or at least not in the same capacity. This reinforced his belief that these were truly separate realities, not just different versions of the same world. The architect Arthur had a family, a career, a life built on solid ground. The librarian Arthur was a solitary figure, his life a quiet echo of what could have been. The contrast was stark and deeply painful. He longed for the warmth of Sarah's hand, the laughter of Lily, the sense of belonging that came with family. He began to question the nature of free will. If he was living two separate lives, were his choices truly his own? Or were they predetermined, playing out according to some cosmic script? The philosophical implications of his condition were as unsettling as the practical ones. He felt like a puppet, his strings being pulled by unseen forces, dancing to a tune he didn't fully comprehend. The weight of this realization pressed down on him, threatening to crush his spirit. One particularly stormy night, the wind howling outside his small apartment, Arthur sat at his desk, his journal open before him. He was tired, profoundly weary of the constant shifts, the emotional turmoil. He wrote, not about a new anomaly, but about his feelings, his fears, his desperate longing for a single, coherent existence. He wrote about the architect, the wife, the daughter, a life he yearned for and mourned simultaneously. As he wrote, the storm outside seemed to intensify, matching the tempest raging within him. Suddenly, a blinding flash of lightning illuminated his room, followed by a deafening clap of thunder. The lights flickered, then died, plunging him into darkness. He fumbled for his flashlight, his heart pounding. When the beam cut through the gloom, he saw it. On his desk, next to his journal, was a crumpled piece of paper. It was a blueprint. Not just any blueprint, but the blueprint for the art gallery he had been discussing with his client in realidad just days before. And scrawled across the top, in his own handwriting, were the words, "Remember me. Find me." This was a direct message, a cry across the void. It wasn't just a crossover, it was an active communication. The two Arthurs were somehow aware of each other, or at least, one was reaching out to the other. The implication was staggering. If he could receive messages, could he send them? Could he influence the other reality? This wasn't just about observation anymore, it was about interaction. The mystery deepened, taking on a new, more urgent dimension. He became obsessed with the message, "Remember me. Find me." What did it mean? Was the architect Arthur trapped? Was he trying to warn him? He spent days poring over the blueprint, searching for hidden clues, deciphering every line, every symbol. He felt a renewed sense of purpose, a glimmer of hope, amidst the despair. He wasn't just a passive observer anymore. He was an active participant in his own extraordinary story. His investigation led him to a small, obscure bookstore specializing in metaphysics and quantum physics. He found a book, dusty and forgotten, titled The Echoing Self, Navigating Multiversal Realities. The book spoke of individuals who, through extreme emotional or intellectual strain, could inadvertently split their consciousness, creating parallel versions of themselves in adjacent realities. It suggested that these splits could sometimes be healed, or at least understood, through focused intent and a deep understanding of one's own core identity. The book also mentioned resonance points, specific locations or objects that could facilitate communication or even temporary transfer between realities. Arthur felt a surge of adrenaline. Resonance points, the locket, The blueprint. These weren't random occurrences. They were clues. He had to find a resonance point, a place or object that held significance in both his realities. He thought about the constants, the things that existed in both his lives, albeit in different contexts. The library, the quiet park, the old clock tower in the town square. He decided to focus on the library itself. In realidade A, it was his workplace, a source of comfort and routine. In realidade B, he remembered designing an extension for a similar historic library in a neighboring city, a project he had poured his heart into. Could the concept of a library, a repository of knowledge and stories, be a resonance point? He began spending his evenings at the library in realidade A, long after closing hours, walking its silent halls, touching the spines of ancient books, hoping to feel a connection, a pull towards his other self. The silence of the library at night was profound, almost sacred. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and dust, a scent that was strangely comforting. He walked through the stacks, his footsteps echoing softly, his mind racing. He thought about the architect Arthur, about Sarah and Lily. He thought about the message, "Remember me. Find me." He felt a growing sense of urgency, a feeling that time was running out. One night, as he stood in the vast empty reading room, a strange sensation washed over him. It was a tingling, a buzzing at the edges of his perception, as if the very air around him was vibrating. The familiar scent of old paper was suddenly mixed with the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the subtle scent of Sarah's perfume. He saw a flicker, a momentary distortion in the air, like heat rising from pavement. And for a fleeting second, he saw himself, the architect Arthur, sitting at one of the reading tables, sketching intently, a half-empty coffee cup beside him. He gasped, reaching out, but the vision vanished as quickly as it appeared. He was alone again, the silence of the library pressing in on him. But he knew, with a certainty that transcended logic, that he had made contact. The library was indeed a resonance point. The architect Arthur was there, or had been there, or would be there. The temporal aspect of his condition was still a bewildering enigma. He started leaving messages for himself, not just in his journal but in the physical space of the library. He would leave a specific book slightly ajar on a shelf, a bookmark tucked inside with a cryptic note. He hoped that the architect Arthur, if he ever found himself in this librarian reality, would recognize these subtle clues. He started writing letters, not knowing where they would go, or if they would ever be received, but driven by an overwhelming need to communicate, to bridge the divide. He wrote about his confusion, his fears, his longing for a unified existence. He wrote about the locket, about Lily, about his desperate search for them. The response came in a way he hadn't anticipated. He found a book on a shelf, one he had never seen before, titled Architectural Marvels of the 21st Century. He opened it, and inside, tucked between two pages, was a photograph. It was a picture of a magnificent skyscraper, its glass facade gleaming in the sunlight. And standing proudly in front of it, a triumphant smile on his face, was the architect Arthur. On the back of the photo, in familiar handwriting, were the words, "The Tower of Two Worlds. Meet me at the top, midnight. The Tower of Two Worlds." He knew exactly what it was. In realidade B, it was his magnum opus, the crowning achievement of his architectural career. It was a landmark, a symbol of innovation and ambition. But in realidade A, it didn't exist, not physically anyway. He realized then that the meeting place wasn't a physical location in realidade A, but a conceptual one, a point of convergence that existed only in the shared consciousness of the two Arthurs. Midnight. He understood. It was the liminal hour, the time between one day and the next, a symbolic bridge between realities. He prepared himself. He packed his journal, the locket, and the blueprint. He knew this was it, the culmination of his arduous journey, the moment of truth. He didn't know what to expect, whether he would find answers or simply more questions. But he had to try. He had to face his other self to understand the truth of his existence. As the clock in the town square struck 12, Arthur found himself standing in the deserted park, directly across from where the library stood. The air was still, pregnant with anticipation. A thin mist had rolled in, obscuring the streetlights, giving the scene an ethereal quality. He looked up at the sky, searching for a sign, a glimmer of the Tower of Two Worlds. He closed his eyes, focusing his intent, his longing, his desperate need for answers. When he opened them, the world had shifted. The quaint, familiar library was gone. In its place, soaring into the inky blackness, was the magnificent skyscraper from the photograph. Its glass facade glinted faintly, reflecting the distant city lights. It was breathtaking, imposing, utterly real. He felt a pull, an undeniable force drawing him towards its entrance. He entered the lobby, a cavernous space of polished marble and gleaming chrome. An elevator, its doors silently parting, seemed to beckon him. He stepped inside, and as the doors closed, he felt a profound sense of destiny. The elevator ascended rapidly, the city lights shrinking below him, until he was climbing through the clouds themselves. When the doors opened again, he found himself on a breathtaking observation deck high above the city. The wind whipped around him, carrying the scent of rain and ozone. And there, standing at the edge, gazing out at the sprawling metropolis, was another man. He was slightly taller, his shoulders broader, his posture more confident. His hair was less gray, his eyes held a spark of ambition. It was the architect Arthur. They turned to face each other, two versions of the same man, separated by a cosmic divide, now standing on the precipice of understanding. There was no surprise, no fear, only a profound sense of recognition, of finally coming home. "You came," the architect Arthur said, his voice calm, yet filled with a deep, resonant emotion. "I had to," the librarian Arthur replied, his own voice hoarse with emotion. "I had to understand." The architect Arthur gestured to the sprawling city below. "This is our world, in its fullest expression. Both our worlds, intertwined." He explained that they were not separate individuals, but two facets of a single consciousness, split by a profound traumatic event in their shared past. A choice, made long ago, had fractured their reality, creating two distinct timelines, two parallel lives. The architect Arthur had chosen one path, the librarian Arthur another. "We are the same person," the architect continued, "experiencing two different consequences of a single pivotal moment. The Tower of Two Worlds is not just a building. It's a representation of our unified potential, the place where our realities can converge." He revealed that the messages, the subtle crossovers, were not random. They were deliberate attempts by his architect self to reach out, to guide his librarian self towards this convergence point. He had been trying to heal the fracture, to bring their consciousness back into alignment. "We can choose to remain separate," the architect said, "to continue living these two distinct lives, forever yearning for what the other possesses. Or we can choose to merge, to integrate our experiences, our memories, our very essence, into a single, complete being." The librarian Arthur looked out at the glittering city, then back at his other self. The choice was monumental, terrifying. To lose one life, to gain another. To surrender the comfort of his quiet existence for the vibrant, demanding life of an architect. But it wasn't about loss. It was about integration, about becoming whole. He thought of Sarah, of Lily, of the love and purpose that awaited him. "What happens when we merge?" the librarian Arthur asked, his voice barely a whisper. The architect Arthur smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached his eyes. "We become whole. We remember everything. We carry the wisdom of both lives, the experiences of both paths. We become the complete Arthur Finch, the man who lived in two timelines and emerged stronger for it. He held out his hand. The librarian Arthur hesitated for only a moment. He looked at his worn leather journal, then at the locket in his hand. He had found his answers. He had found his family. He had found himself. He reached out and grasped the architect's hand. As their hands met, a blinding light engulfed them. It wasn't painful, but exhilarating, like 1,000 memories rushing through him at once. He felt a profound sense of peace, a feeling of completeness he had never known. The world around them shimmered, then solidified. The tower, the city, the very air became undeniably, gloriously real. When the light faded, there was only one Arthur Finch standing on the observation deck. He was taller, his posture straighter, his eyes holding a depth of experience that transcended a single lifetime. He felt the memories of both lives, distinct yet seamlessly integrated. The quiet satisfaction of shelving a rare book, the thrill of seeing a skyscraper rise from the earth, the comforting weight of Sarah's hand in his, the joyous laughter of Lily. It was all there, a rich tapestry of existence woven into a single magnificent whole. He looked down at the city, no longer a stranger to him. He knew its streets, its history, its pulse. He knew his place within it. He was Arthur Finch, architect, librarian, husband, father, a man who had traversed the impossible and returned, whole and complete. The mystery of his fractured reality had been solved, not by choosing one path over the other, but by embracing both, by recognizing that every choice, every experience contributed to the grand tapestry of his being. He had found his way home, not to a single reality, but to the unified self he was always meant to be. The story of Arthur Finch serves as a powerful reminder that reality is often far more complex and wondrous than we can ever imagine. It challenges us to question our perceptions, to look beyond the obvious, and to consider the infinite possibilities that may lie just beyond our grasp. Perhaps in some other timeline, another version of you is watching this very video, wondering about the choices you've made and the lives you might be living. If Arthur's journey through parallel realities has left you contemplating the mysteries of existence, don't keep it to yourself. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a moment where reality felt off? Do you believe in parallel universes? And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel for more mind-bending tales and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the unexplained. Your support helps us continue to uncover the secrets that lie hidden in the shadows.